Hey everyone! It's come to my attention that a lot of players and content creators alike don't quite understand how the energy system works in Genshin Impact, so I'm going to be making this video today to help you guys understand the basics and some advanced tips on how to get your burst skills faster so you can deal more damage, and as well as some other irregularities. Alright, let's first talk about some of the basic or common ways you're going to be gaining energy. The first way is going to be that you're going to auto attack to gain some energy. About 4 auto attacks will equate to some energy, as you saw there. Another way you can gain energy is through elemental skills. And you see these elemental particles here that will give energy. And then another way that you're going to be able to get energy is through pushing monsters to certain HP thresholds to drop particles. As you see there, I got a clear particle. And then you can also kill enemies to get some particles as well, or orbs. As you see there, I get a clear particle there. We're not going to be talking too much about gaining energy through basic hits because it varies between weapon type and characters, but you can gain energy through charge tags. You can see here on my raises bar, spinning around will raise it up slightly as I go around. You can also gain it through bow attacks and any other weapon that you end up landing hits with. And keep in mind that the energy that you gain from base attacks only applies to the person landing the attacks. As you can see here, my D-Luke is very close to getting his burst skill, but if I attack with my razor over and over to gain energy, you'll see here that I do not get anything from my D-Luke. Now, before we talk about gaining energy through elemental skills, let's talk about gaining energy through HP thresholds. You can see here this Rune Guard has almost 75% HP, and then when we get his HP down, you see next to his body there's a fat orb that only comes to us when we get close to it. That large orb is an elemental orb or a clear orb. Each monster has its own different thresholds. This Rune Guard here has thresholds at 75 and 50, as well as other points. But most monsters have thresholds at 50% and 0%. Large monsters will often drop orbs, while smaller monsters will drop particles, as you saw for the Hilichurls. And also keep in mind, when you kill a monster, you'll see here that the orb is on the floor, but it expires very quickly if you do not pick it up. Now for the fun bit. Each elemental skill gives a different amount of particles, such as Noelle's skill giving 0 particles, as you can see here, and Diona's skill giving 4 to 5 particles, as you see there. Now what's interesting is most skills have a varying degree of 1 for how many particles it generates. For example, D-Luke will generate between 1 to 2 particles each time he does his E. You can see here that I'm getting 1, then 2. Now when we show it here again, you see here I'm getting 2 particles on that first hit, and then on my second hit I'm going to be getting 2 again. And then on my third hit, let's see how many we get. We get 1 on that one. For the third and final trial, we'll see here on the first hit we're getting 2, then we're going to be getting 1, and then on the third hit, we are gonna get 2. Just so this video isn't too long, I'm not gonna show every character, but you can see here with Jean, she is gonna be getting 3 particles in that first hit, and then on the second one, she is getting 2 particles. Now, before you start saying that the amount of particles generated is related to how much energy recharge you have, you can see here that energy recharge increases the amount of energy regenerated with each elemental particle and elemental orb obtained, not how many particles are generated. Now that you guys know most of the ways the energy is generated, let's talk about how much energy you get from particles and orbs. You can see from this table that's from the Genshin Impact Team Building Resource 2.0 from Reddit that an elemental particle that goes to a unit of the same element on the field will give 3 energy. An elemental orb under the same conditions will give 9 energy to the unit on the field. An elemental orb will usually only come from reaching HP thresholds of large slimes or larger enemies naturally imbued with an element. Clear particles and orbs are a neutral energy source, so you'll be getting the same amount of energy regardless of the element of the character. You usually only get these from HP thresholds of monsters. As you can see here, whether it's of the same element or a different element, you're getting 2 and 6, and over here, whether it's the same element or a different element in the party, you're getting 1.2 and 3.6. If you look at these values, you can see that an orb is always going to be 3 times the value of energy compared to a particle, whether it's for party or on field. And if you see here, a neutral or clear source of energy will always be 2/3 the value of an energy source of the same element. However, when you compare clear or neutral energy sources to elemental sources being absorbed by a different element, that will always be worth 2 times the value, where you see this is 1 and this is 2, this one's 3, and this is 6. Now let's talk about field and party mechanics. Field means the unit is on the field and absorbs the particles or orbs. Party means they are off the field when the particles are absorbed by the person on the field. When someone absorbs a particle or an orb on the field of the same element, they will get 66.67% more energy than somebody in the party that is also of the same element. When you gain energy from a source that is of a different element than your own, you will end up with a third of the energy of if it was of the same element. You can see here, you're getting 3 into 1, 9 into 3, 1.8 into 0.6, and 5.4 into 1.8. Now, when it comes to energy recharge, every character starts at a base of 100% energy recharge, and so if somebody has 200% energy recharge, you'd be multiplying the number that you see here by your energy recharge. So, for example, if somebody was to receive an elemental particle on the field of the same element, and they had 200% energy recharge, this value would turn from 3 energy gained to 6 energy gained. Energy recharge also works when you're in the party, so if you ended up receiving 1.8 energy per particle and you had 200% energy recharge, you'd be getting 3.6 energy per particle instead. Now, I know all these numbers can be a little bit overwhelming for some people, so the main takeaways is just basically going to be that if you use a skill and swap to another character of a different element, they'll end up getting a third of the energy that you would have gotten if you just stayed on that character and picked up those particles first. And if you did swap, the person that originally used the skill would probably end up getting about 3/5 the energy. Now I'm going to show you some ways of how players often put themselves in situations for inefficient energy gain. The first way is where players use a skill and they'll automatically switch to the next character and use a skill over and over to burn their elemental skills as fast as possible, so they can get back to their main DPS. Now when Bennett uses his elemental skill and then the orbs get absorbed by Venti, you're only going to be getting 1 energy per pyro orb instead of getting 3 energy per pyro orb that Bennett would have been getting. Now when Venti uses his elemental skill and switches to a team member of the same element, that team member will be getting 3 energy, however Venti would only be getting 1.8 energy per particle. This is the reason why you have multiple of the same element on a team, especially of the same element as your main DPS, so that you have better energy gain so you can get your burst skill a lot quicker. However, you don't only want to have one element on a team, because if you only have one element on a team, you will not be doing any elemental reactions. Elemental reactions is a large part of your damage in this game. However, the exception to this rule is if you're fighting a lot of targets that have innate element already, such as slimes. So naturally, you'd want all elemental particles and orbs to be absorbed by somebody of the same element as that particle or orb, so that you can get 3 times the amount of energy. However, there will be some situations where maybe you would need to get your burst skill a lot quicker, so that you end up healing one of your teammates so they don't die. So you could do some situation like this, where you would attack with Bennett and then go over to Jean, so that you get those particles, and then you go to Venti, and then go back over to Jean, so you can get those particles there, and so that you can end up rushing your burst skill a lot quicker. As many of you may have noticed, there is a travel time for particles and orbs, and because of this, players will often end up using their burst skill into their elemental skill like this, so that they don't end up overcapping on their energy. But because of this, they will often switch off their character during this time as well, or just have a lot of time standing there waiting for the particle to be absorbed and get the energy. Now, to help combat this issue, you could always do an animation cancel where you use your elemental skill into an elemental burst skill, and while your burst skill is animating, the particles from your elemental skill will travel into your character. Once again, this is what it would look like if you used your burst skill into an elemental skill, where you would have to wait for your particles to come into you before you could swap off to get maximum energy gain. Now, an example of where you might not want to do this animation cancel is that maybe you have gear on your Venti and you'd rather have damage on a group of targets after your ulti sucks them up, rather than a singular target into an animation cancel such as this, where you'd rather burst, have them all group up, and then use your elemental skill. Also, keep in mind, not all characters play nicely with animation cancels. For example, Klee will not animation cancel if you use your E into your burst. You see I still have my elemental skill there. And for those that don't know, even if you do immune damage or no damage at all, you still will generate elemental particles, as you saw there from Kaya, and you see here from Diona. I am still generating particles, even if I do no damage. And even if you hit a shield, such as a miniatural shield, or if you hit like a slime shield, you still will generate particles as well, even if you do no damage, as you see here. Even if you're doing no damage, I still find it helpful and useful to end up using your elemental skills so that you can generate particles for, say, Bennett for his heal or his buff, or just any other character on an off-element particle gain. This will help you prepare for the next wave or the next chamber so that you can kill it a lot faster. Now, a question I often get asked is if someone should use a Favonius weapon or a Sacrificial weapon on their character for energy gain. You can see here on the Favonius weapon, it has a lot of energy recharge compared to a Sacrificial weapon, where a Sacrificial weapon will have more base attack than a Favonius weapon. When dealing a crit with a Favonius weapon, there's a chance that it will generate a small amount of energy particles, which is going to be 3 clear or neutral particles that will result in 6 energy for the character that absorbs the particles, as well as energy for the party, which will be about 3.6 energy to each party member. You'll see here when I deal a crit, particles will form from my character, in which you could technically swap off that character as soon as you deal a crit, so that another character could end up getting the field energy gain. Now for the sacrificial weapons, you have a chance when you deal damage with an elemental skill to reset the cooldown of your elemental skill to generate more damage and more elemental particles. But remember to keep in mind that not all skills are created equal, where something like Diona's Hold E skill could generate something like 4 particles, while Venti's skill would generate something like 2 particles. Now let's say for example Diona ended up proccing her sacrificial bow with her Hold E and she ended up getting 4 cryo particles, but her teammates were not cryo element. That would mean that they would only generate 2.4 energy, and if it was Venti who generated 2 anemo particles and they were of not the same element, they would get 1.2 energy for the reset. So if you just purely want more energy recharge, pick the Favonius weapon, and if you do have high crit rate, you could also end up taking advantage of this passive, or maybe you have a multi-hit elemental skill or an elemental burst skill. But if you do have gear on your unit and you want to do more damage, a sacrificial weapon might be your choice. Now that you guys know about the general tips for energy gain, let's talk about some of the fun character-specific irregularities. There will be timestamps below if you don't care for some of these characters or don't own some of these characters. And for Klee, as you guys know, that she can't do a proper animation cancel if she moves too quickly, but if you end up spacing out your E into your Q, then you'll actually end up doing your elemental skill. For Tartaglia or Childe, some of you may not know, but he actually only generates his own hydro particles from his Riptide flashes or his Riptide slashes. His elemental stance change actually does not generate any sort of energy gain. When you do a Riptide slash, you can generate anywhere between 0 and 1 particle. And also, when you do hit multiple targets to do multiple slashes or flashes, you'll actually only generate 1 particle at a time. For Razor, when you tap your E, not only do you generate elemental particles, but you also get this orb that increases your energy gain. You can read his talents to understand more about it. And when you use your burst skill, you also absorb that orb to give yourself energy as well. And while you're in your burst skill, when you use your skill, you actually do not generate your own electro particles anymore because it's technically your burst skill performing that action. You can see here the wolf is the one that's actually slashing. You will still generate the big electro particles that increase your energy gain, as well as you can hold down your E to consume them to gain energy as well. So while you're in Razor's burst form, you may want to consider just tapping your elemental skill rather than holding it down unless you need that extra damage or that AoE from holding it down. As you may know, Fischl's elemental skill summons Oz, and every time Oz attacks, every second it can generate an elemental particle. But did you also know that when you use your burst skill, it summons Oz, and this will also land elemental particles from each Oz attack? This is just one of many reasons which makes Fischl such a great support. She could end up generating 10 particles per elemental skill and 10 particles per elemental burst skill. Now for Mona, what's actually interesting about her is that she actually doesn't generate any elemental particles for Hydro until the taunt actually ends. And no matter how many targets it hits or how many times it hits, it'll always generate the same amount of particles of 2 or 3 Hydro particles. Now for these members in my party, they actually don't generate any elemental particles from their elemental skills. You'll see here Noelle has no particles coming out. Qiqi, when she puts out her aura, she gets no particles either, even if you end up hitting a target with it. And then for Barbara, you can use your elemental skill and you actually get nothing either. For Lisa, she is a little bit different. When you tap your elemental skill, you actually don't generate particles. As you can see here, no particles being formed. However, when you do hold down your elemental skill and fully charge it, you will actually start generating particles. MiHoYo, please buff these characters. I know that was a lot to take in, so I just want to summarize and restate some of the more important parts of the video. Basically, if you're off the field when energy is absorbed, you're going to get 3/5 the energy of somebody that is on the field. If you are absorbing energy of a different element, you're going to get 1/3 of the energy. And if you're somehow off the field and also absorbing a different element, you're going to get 1/5 the energy. Make sure that when you're using your elemental skills and rotating between your characters, it's actually going to a character that you need extra energy for, or that it is going on somebody of the same element. Take advantage of animation cancels to save time and increase damage, as well as energy gain. Make sure you know how each character generates its own energy and how much they end up generating. And lastly, pick a Favonius weapon if you want more energy recharge, and pick a Sacrificial weapon if you want more damage and have some energy recharge as well. Alright, that's going to be all from me today. Hope you guys enjoyed the video and learned something. Please do consider leaving a like, comment down below if you have any other energy tips, or if you know of any irregularities for certain characters. Subscribe for more Genshin related content. Join our Discord to be part of our Genshin Impact community. Follow me on Twitch for some live tips, and follow me on my socials such as Twitter and Instagram for short and quick infographics and some sneak peeks for the game. I'll see you guys later. Bye.